Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm-fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. So, you've spent a few months, you've grown some cabbages, or maybe you've come home from the farmer's market with a beautiful box of veggies because, no hate if you don't have a garden going at the moment. Everything looks amazing for about a week, and then everything starts to go soft. Cabbage will start looking a bit suspicious. Zucchini, not so great, because they look best when they're fresh. And you're standing in the kitchen wondering if you're about to feed all the stuff you've just bought to the compost pile instead of your family. Now, imagine taking that cabbage and turning it into something that lasts for months. It also tastes great, it improves with age, and it's fantastic for your gut, even for people like me who are a predominant, carnivore, ketovore kind of lifestyle. This is a food that seriously is good for your gut. And there's a few things that I have to check out that I haven't checked out, and I will. So I'll kind of keep you posted on that. But you don't need a freezer. You don't need a pressure canner. You don't need any fancy equipment like dehydrators, which, I've looked at a dehydrator. We're off grid. I don't know how it'd work. Anyway, just cabbage, salt, and thyme. And you can turn it into something really, really good for your family and really, really good for your gut. Welcome to today's episode of Ditch the Store. It is Fermentation 101, Sauerkraut and More. We're going to be talking about how to make your first batch of sauerkraut. And I actually have the recipe, so like how much salt to cabbage kind of thing, and why fermentation has been keeping people fed for thousands of years. We're also going to talk about how you can get started in your kitchen this week without any special equipment. It's CJ here from Mojo Homestead. I'm on my own, the handy helpers at work, and let's get fermenting. So before we jump into today's episode, I just want to say if you are not on the Mojo Homestead email list, jump on. Go to www.mojohomestead.net and you'll find a page of freebies, and you can jump on our mailing list there and get a freebie at the same time, which is great. I also post blog posts to there, and I update anything to do with the books that are coming out to there as well. And the link will be in the show notes. And also I have a massive favour to ask, and I never ask this on the podcast. I always think it just feels a bit weird asking, but if you are loving listening to the podcast, and I know I have some regular listeners out there, if you're loving listening to the podcast, please leave me a review on the platform that you're listening on. It helps my podcast move up the ranks and get out to more people. If it's a 5-star review, that's amazing. That's even better. And if you leave a 5-star review, I will give you a shout out on one of the podcast episodes. So if you could do that, pretty please, I would really appreciate it. So today's episode, what is fermentation? Now, most people think about fermentation, they start thinking about things like beer and wine, or weird science experiments, or something that's been forgotten in the fridge and is suddenly growing, which we've all been guilty of. Anybody who's time poor and has a family, if you haven't left something in the fridge and it's developed a life of its own, you're a better person than I am, because I have definitely done that. But fermentation is actually one of humanity's oldest food preservation methods. And the simple explanation for it is that fermentation happens when beneficial microorganisms consume sugars and create acids. And this is one of the things I want to check out, is consuming those sugars, then making that food a better source of food for people like me who have insulin issues and who, are definitely affected more by insulin than other people. Would that make that food better for me? Because that might explain why I can eat sourdough, because sourdough bread is a fermentation. That might explain why I can eat sourdough without getting a gut ache, whereas I eat commercial bread and I get a gut ache. So those acids that go in and are created when the sugars are consumed, they preserve the food. They improve the flavour, some people say. Some people don't like fermented foods, but I certainly love sourdough bread in comparison to normal bread. If you like yogurt, then you probably like fermented foods. They create beneficial bacteria, which is all those good probiotics that are in fermented foods, and they make some nutrients easier to absorb. And again, this is why I think I can have sourdough bread and not commercial bread. So some examples that you already know but you may not think about as being fermented food is yogurt, cheese, sourdough breads, pickles. Pickles are generally fermented. Kimchi, which I love. I love kimchi. My workmates and I sometimes go to a restaurant that is a Korean kind of barbecue restaurant. Korean, is it? Yes, Korean. Or it might be Vietnamese. And they serve up kimchi in these bowls in the centre of the table. Oh my God, I could just eat that. Sauerkraut, which is traditionally Northern European, and kombucha. So your scobies that you get your fizzy drink and make your homemade fizzy drinks with. Kombucha is also a form of fermentation, and anybody that's grown kombucha liquid or kefir liquids will definitely say it has a life of its own. It's like a growing organism. Now, the surprising part about all of it is that humans have actually been fermenting foods for thousands of years because, we didn't always have refrigeration, and humans had to come up with a way, particularly in areas where it's really, really cold and you can't always grow fresh food or find fresh food through the winter months, which is predominantly why a lot of Northern Hemisphere people were more of a carnivore, a meat-based diet through winter. Eskimos and Inuit people, I think we don't say Eskimos anymore, we say Inuits, they predominantly ate seal, whale, that kind of thing, meat during winter, because obviously nothing grows above the Arctic line, so what are you going to eat? But fermented foods and certain meats can be fermented as well. I think there's a fermented meat that they do in Iceland, which is fish, which gets buried underground and comes out really, really strong. I can't imagine what that would be like. I've never tried it, and I'm not sure that I'd get past the smell. But every culture has fermented foods. And I remember reading years ago, excuse me, that nomadic Central Asian people used to carry mare's milk, horse milk, because they used to drink horse milk. They probably still do, carried mare's milk in a leather bag or skin while they were travelling on horseback. And the milk was constantly shaken and agitated during the day, and naturally occurring bacteria and yeast fermented it. So it made kind of like a drinking yogurt. And the drink, I looked it up, it's called erag, known as kumis in some Turkish regions. It's slightly sour, a little bit fizzy. It actually has a slightly alcoholic content, which is the fermentation process, because beer and wine are fermented as well, usually around 1 to 3%. Very, very rich in probiotics, and it's more liquid than yogurt. So it's like a drinking yogurt kind of thing, texture. And I have tried it over when I was in Tibet. I tried it, and it's a very strong taste, but at the same time, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like the smell wasn't so strong that you couldn't get past it. The leather bags were often hung also around the entrances of yurts, and anyone entering or leaving would give the bag a quick stir to help the fermentation process along. Now, one of the reasons that historians believe that fermented foods became common long before refrigeration was that nomadic cultures discovered that fermented milk was often safer and lasted longer than fresh milk, which I think is really interesting. It just, it doesn't... the fermentation process makes it last longer, but it also makes it safe to drink, as in it hasn't gone off, but it is kind of off milk. So get your head around that. It wasn't invented by scientists. It was invented by ordinary people just trying to make their food last longer. And the things that the Mongols did with the horse milk, Europeans did later with cheese, yogurt, kefir. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I always say kefir, but it could be pronounced differently. Sauerkraut, using beneficial microbes to preserve the food naturally, which I think is really, really cool. It's a science experiment with your food. Excuse me. I keep having to have slurps in my tea because I'm a little bit croaky still. I'm still getting over the cough that I had a month ago now. So why fermentation matters on the homestead? Why is it important to us as homesteaders? Well, because it reduces food waste. If you have too many vegetables, ferment them and they will last so much longer. Now, we have modern refrigeration, so we can kind of halt the fermenting process, and I'll discuss that a bit later. But once you get your sauerkraut, your kimchi, your pickles to a point where you're happy with the taste, putting it in the fridge slows the fermentation process down, and then that will last at that taste that you're happy with for a lot longer. And so it extends the shelf life of things. Cabbage will last for, a week or two. Maybe you might get 3 weeks out of it. Sauerkraut lasts for months, which means that anything you've grown that you haven't been able to consume, you will still be able to consume it months later. It supports your gut health, which is the real reason why I started doing it. And I had my first crack at sauerkraut through the summer months, and I learned my lesson. Winter is a better time to do it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But gut microbiome, digestion, and traditional foods, when we eat so much processed crap now, these foods were better for our gut health, not just because we grew them ourselves and they weren't covered in pesticides and things like that, but also because the actual bacteria that's in them is a good bacteria, because our guts are made of bacteria, but there's good and bad bacteria, and there can be an imbalance in bacteria as well. So having enough of the good bacteria is a good thing, particularly if you're still consuming some processed foods. Saves money. Fermented foods are expensive. I bought a jar of kimchi probably 6 months ago now, and it was like if you buy the good stuff, not the really cheap, crappy stuff, but if you buy the good stuff that just is proper kimchi, proper sauerkraut, and not these things that have been kind of hurried up on their fermentation process by using chemicals, they are expensive to get the really good breads. It's the same. I've just done the sardine challenge to try and reset my insulin, and sardines, there is a big difference between cheap, nasty sardines and really good quality sardines. And do you think I can get the really good quality ones? I have 1 tin of it. I'd bought a tin of all different brands to try to see which ones I liked. The 1 tin that I really, really enjoyed, I cannot find anywhere. I looked online and it was like $10 a tin for it. And I'm like, I'm not paying $10 a tin. So I've gone back to my eggs and steak. But it is cheaper to make it yourself than to have to buy it from the shop. It costs what the cost of a cabbage is with some salt and a clean glass jar. And it builds food security. Obviously, this is all about ditching the store, ditching the supermarket, being able to cut your reliance on supermarkets and be able to grow something and then preserve it and keep it in your fridge without having to go back and buy anything. That is what we're all aiming for. That's what homesteaders are aiming for. So if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely that's what you're aiming for too. So a couple of myths about fermentation, because I have a couple of workmates who've said to me when I've mentioned it, and I work with a girl who's Austrian at the moment, lovely girl, and her family do a lot of fermentation as well. So we were talking about it and some other workmates were listening in and they were like, aren't you worried you'll poison your family? So that's number one myth. Will you poison your family? No. The reality is if you do it properly, proper fermentation is very, very safe. You will know if something has gone wrong, because I have fermented sauerkraut, cabbage before, and there wasn't enough fluid in there and it went bad. And oh my God, the smell is next level. It's not that fermentation of cabbage smell, that sauerkraut smell. It is bad food smell. So for the beneficial bacteria to create that acidic environment, it makes it very difficult for the harmful bacteria to survive. But you can buck it up. You absolutely can. So it's important to follow a couple of rules, but you will not poison your family if you do it properly. Everything has to be sterile is myth number 2. No, you don't. I have Milton that I use to clean out my milking bottles, because I keep my milk bottles very, very clean. And that's just something that I've always had in my head. But in all honesty, hot soapy water, washing out a bottle is more than enough in most cases. So long as there is no trace of food left in there when you clean it out, and you wash it out properly and rinse it. You can go through the process of pouring hot water into a bottle and sterilising it that way. Some people sterilise in their dishwashers. Some people will stick it in a bucket of hot water on a fireplace for 5 minutes and then take it out with tongs or something sterile and clean and put it somewhere to dry before they put food into it. But honestly, just a clean jar is fine. And that's why I say you don't need any special equipment. It's not the same as canning. Fermentation is complicated. Honestly, the simplest recipe in the world is sauerkraut. And I think everybody should start with that. Even if you don't think you'll like sauerkraut, try it, because you might be surprised that homemade proper sauerkraut, like not the stuff you get in the shop that's been sitting in a jar for like months and months and months and it's been processed in a different way to what you're going to do, you might find you really like it. But it's literally cabbage, salt and water, and that's it. So it's pretty simple. And it's pretty simple recipe to follow. If I can follow it, and I can cook, but I'm definitely no chef or anything like that. Myth number 4, it always smells terrible. No, if it smells terrible, if it smells rotten, putrid or offensive, like if you smell it and go, oh no, that's really fucking bad, then chances are the jar wasn't clean. You didn't have enough brine sitting over the cabbage, and air has got in. Air is not the friend, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but air and fermenting food is not good. You want food below the liquid line. So it should smell tangy, slightly sour, like how sourdough smells. When you get that smell of sourdough and you go, oh, it's got that real sour tang to it. But it should still smell fresh, and it should still smell like you want to eat it. Your nose will be a really good tool in this. If it smells bad, and look too, when I fucked up my batch of sauerkraut in summer because I didn't have enough brine, I was at work. I actually think I went into hospital with one of my surgeries, and the brine dehydrated enough to come below the cabbage line, and the handy helper and the kids didn't realise. And by the time I went back to it, there was actually a layer of mould growing on top of the cabbage. Obviously, if there's mould growing, throw it, can it, don't can it, turf it. But use your nose. And if it smells bad, it's probably bad. It should just smell that tangy smell. So sauerkraut is probably the easiest one to start with out of all the fermentations. And once you get past sauerkraut, there's a million other things you can do. So I would start with that because it's cheap, it's forgiving, it's easy to learn, and it's pretty simple. So what you want is 1 cabbage and some salt. Doesn't matter what kind of salt. Use whatever salt you want. I use the cheap bagged salt. I buy like a 10-kilo bag of salt from Costco, and I have it sitting in a tub, and I refill my salt bowl that I keep on the stovetop. I refill it out of that, and I have a jar that I fill up salt into. So just doesn't matter what salt. If you want to use fancy salt, go ahead. Don't need to use rock salt. You want the finer salt, like you want it really grainy, like not the big chunks, not the rock salt type one. So you need a bowl, a jar, and some scales. Realistically, some scales would be handy. So you want to slice your cabbage into really thin strips, shredding it basically. The thinner it is, the better it seems to work. If you've got too many chunky bits in there, and you can have a few chunky bits in there, they're always nice to just for texture, but the thinner that you slice it, the better it will probably turn out. Certainly that's been my experience. And then you put the shredded cabbage into a bowl, weigh it, I would say, because what you want is it's 2% salt to weight. And that, for the beginners out there, think about 1 tablespoon per kilo of cabbage. So put it on a bowl, weigh it, how many kilos you've got. 1 tablespoon per kilo of cabbage is enough. Don't oversalt it. Don't undersalt it. You need to have salt on. And remember, salt's not the enemy. We were told for years that salt is the enemy. And we now know, it's like the whole cholesterol myth of, you can't eat 6 eggs a day. I eat 6 eggs a day without a problem. My cholesterol is like rock bottom. Your body makes more cholesterol than what you can ever eat. I actually heard a nutritionist say that the other day. Your body will make more cholesterol than you can ever eat. So eat those eggs, enjoy them. So don't skimp on the salt. You need to put salt in there, and there's a reason for that. You want to massage the cabbage. So give it a really good mix through of all the salt with your bare hands. You can put gloves on if you really don't like getting, dirty, but bare hands is probably better. Give it a really good kind of massage, and I'd say I probably spent 5 minutes every time I do it, doing that massage. The more you massage the salt in, the more the fluid comes out. The salt draws the water out of the cabbage, and that becomes part of the brine, which is what you want. And it softens up the cabbage, and it makes it start to look like sauerkraut. So the brine will start forming. So once that's done, once you can see there's liquid sitting in the bottom of the bowl and the cabbage is starting to soften right up, then you want to push the cabbage into a jar. And when I say push it in a jar, you want to pack it in tight at the bottom. Use your fist and push it down into the jar. You don't want air pockets in there. You want it as little air in the jar below the brine. Sorry, thinking about which way then. Below the brine as you possibly can. So you want all the air kind of pushed out from around the cabbage. Then you want to submerge it. Now, you can make up some brine. It's just salted water. So I would say a tablespoon of water to 1 litre of 1 litre of water. And you want to top the cabbage up so that the cabbage is below the brine, and it needs to be well below the brine because some of that brine will evaporate, and you really don't want it to go below the cabbage because that's when things get bad. So make sure that the brine is sitting, I would say, half a thumb above the cabbage at bare minimum. You can do more, you just have to drain it off when you pack it to put in the fridge. So what you want then is to have a lid on it that will allow air to escape. I have a jar, which I'll post a photo of. I have a jar that's got a breather pipe out of the top of it. So I put the lid on tight so that nothing can get into it. No dust can get in, no other bugs can get in. Although some people say having bacteria in the air get into your fermentations can sometimes make it a little bit better. It's a bit like with sourdough, with your starter. It's not bad for the air. Like each environment has its own kind of bacteria. But you want the air to be able to escape and keep all the cabbage under the brine level. So day 1, you'll just have salted cabbage in there. Day 3, you'll notice bubbles will start to form, and this is the fermentation process starting. By day 7, the tang will develop. Now, this is where it gets tricky. You have to decide which flavour of sauerkraut you want. Anywhere between 7 and 21 days will give you sauerkraut, but it depends on your taste. If you don't want it really, really tangy, go somewhere between 7 and 14 days. And that's when you want to take the fermentation process away, pack it into a clean jar and put it in the fridge. If you want really tangy sauerkraut or you're really after those probiotics, then go to day 21. But be warned, you have to keep an eye on the brine because if at any point the cabbage comes above the brine level, you'll end up with bad sauerkraut. You don't want that. Now, temperature affects this process, and I found this out the hard way. If you do this in summer, you will likely, Australian summer, 7 days. 7 days and you will have sauerkraut. That's why it's probably a better process to practice in winter and get a handle on it. In winter in Australia, unless you're up in the north, 21 days, you'd probably have really good sauerkraut at 21 days. And I'm in the process of doing it at the moment, so I'll let you know. But in summer, 7 days, and I had sauerkraut. And, of course, I ended up in hospital and the kids didn't realise, the handicapper didn't realise. The brine sunk below the level. The next thing we had mould and the whole lot had to get turfed into the compost. But taste it along the way. Now, always clean, goes without saying, clean spoon, clean fork into the jar to get some sauerkraut out. Try it. If you like it, if it's at the taste you want, take it out of the jar that you're fermenting it in, put it into a clean jar, packed in tight with the brine above the cabbage level and put in the fridge. Once it goes into the fridge, it actually stops the fermentation process. So then it will keep for indefinitely for months. In fact, I'll have to have a look and see, and I'll let you know how long it does keep. But certainly I've seen Northern Europeans who've had sauerkraut in big containers in root cellars that are below, like fridge temperature, and 6 months, and they're still eating the sauerkraut. So obviously, use your nose. If you smell it and it smells bad, don't eat it. That's we were given that ability to smell bad food for a reason. If it smells bad, it's likely bad. Don't eat it. So what can go wrong? Because people will always think this. The white film on top, which is, it's not mold, but it's a form of yeast, and it's not dangerous. You can skim it off. I probably wouldn't if I'm feeding it to my kids. I would probably turf it and start again. Any of these, I'd probably turf it and start again. But that's because, I don't want to make my kids sick. But you can certainly, if it's sitting on the water level and not touching the sauerkraut underneath, the cabbage underneath, you can probably skim it off and be fine. Mold, different story. Mold is a definite, as soon as you get mold, it's the same with sourdough. Discard it, start again, because you can't come back from mold. There's lots of things you can come back from. Mold's not one of them. Mold, it's just too risky, and nobody wants to make their family sick. No bubbles. Now, if this happens, it means the fermentation process isn't happening. And that could be that it's too cold, because like I said, cold stops the fermentation process. So if it's too cold where you live, then it's not fermenting. So you might want to kind of test out around your house and move your fermentation jar to a different spot in the house that maybe isn't as cold. Maybe somewhere in the kitchen. If you've got a wood fire like we do, maybe put it somewhere in the room where the wood fire is, just to try and bring that temperature up. Too much salt, that's why you have to measure and weigh. If you go overboard with the salt, it can be as bad as going under with the salt. So yeah, and not enough time. And that comes back to the cold thing. In winter, like I said, 14 to 21 days, you probably get great sauerkraut. In summer, 7 days, and we had beautiful sauerkraut. So the enough time thing comes down to what the room temperature is and how quickly that fermentation process is happening. Now, if you have slimy texture with your sauerkraut, that's usually temperature that's fluctuating or not getting too high, not cold enough. So you want it at that nice even temperature. So that would be, if you look like it was fermenting too quickly, move it to somewhere colder in the house to try and slow that process down. Overflowing jars. It actually supposedly is quite common. I've not had that problem, but the fermentation creates a gas, and that's why you see bubbles in the jar. So if you feel like there is fluid coming out the top of your jar, and my jar is huge, so I've not had that problem because of that. But if you've got a smaller jar that you're using, just put a baking tray or something like that underneath it with some paper towel, and that'll just collect some of that overflow. But just try and make sure that the brine stays over the top of the cabbage, because if the liquid comes out, fizzes out too much, you might end up with too dry cabbage, and then you'll end up with mold, and that's, shit story that you don't want to talk about. Now, don't be scared to experiment either. I mean, have a crack at it, and if it goes pear-shaped, put in your compost. It costs you a cabbage and some salt. The more you experiment with it and try, it's a bit like sourdough. The more you experiment with it and try, the better it'll get. So, once you've mastered sauerkraut, what should you be doing next? Carrots, they can be really crunchy and beginner friendly. Beetroot, I love fermented beetroot. I love shredded beetroot that's pickled. So, and that's a form of fermentation, but you'll get really good colour out of it. I mean, the sauerkraut that I'm making at the moment is purple and green cabbage, so it's a mix of both. Fermented garlic. Now, I've not tried this, but supposedly really, really yummy. Pickles is just a form of fermentation, just little cucumbers stuck in a jar. You can slice them, you can put them in whole, whichever one you want. You can put some herbs in with them, some garlic in with them. Kimchi, which I haven't had a go at making yet, but it's Asian cabbage, and it's a bit spicy. So you can put chili and things like that in with it to make it a bit more spicy. And I want to have a go at making it because I do like kimchi, like I like eating it. And of course, sourdough. Now that's a completely different rabbit hole. We're not going to go right into that today, but you will, if you can do sauerkraut, you can absolutely do a sourdough starter. Now, fermentation in the seasons. We discussed this a little bit before, but I wanted to just go over it again. Winter is the best time to really, I think, in Australia to start doing your fermentations because you can control the speed of the fermentation a little bit better. Cooler temperatures means slower fermentation and it's more forgiving for beginners. I started, like I say, in summer and it was the worst thing I could have done because it just ran away from it and got too much. Summer fermentations, you have to keep an eye on. You have to be really, really monitoring them all the time. Whereas in winter, you can kind of check them once a day, and that's about it. If you have a really hot day in summer, it can run off. Like you could end up with it going too far. And it can also dehydrate a fair bit and then you have to monitor the brine all the time. So if you are in a hurry, summer's a great time to do it. If you're not in a hurry, winter is a great time to do it. And advice for beginners. And I still consider myself a beginner with fermentation because I'm still, I'm learning all the time, but I like the idea of having an open mindset, like a real learning mindset. So I don't mind making mistakes because if I make a mistake, like my little poster in the kids' room says, making a mistake just means you've worked out a way that it doesn't work. And that's pretty much it with fermentation. Try it and see how you go. You don't need a fancy fermentation crock pot. Although if you've got the money, go ahead and buy one. Be lovely. They look great. I have a big jar with a breather on it, but it didn't really cost me that much. I think it was about $40 brand new. So, a little bit dear, but, it'll last me forever, hopefully. You don't need expensive kits. I know they sell them in some of the kitchen shops. You don't need the expensive kits. If you don't have a breather, I would say cheesecloth over the top with an elastic band so that air can get out. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you could seal it a bit more so that the air's not escaping as much, but I don't think it matters. You can start with just one cabbage, one jar and one batch and see how you go. And if it's not for you, don't do it again. Don't waste your time doing it if it's really not for you. But make one and have a crack at it and see how it feels to do that. Now, if you see the fancy weights that they sell as well, I don't use the weights, but if you think, I'd really like to use weights to keep the cabbage below the brine, I really want to make sure it doesn't come up above the brine level. The best way to do that, if you don't want to have to spend money on the weights, is if you've got a wide mouth jar that you're putting it in, get a small saucer or plate or even a cup or any kind of glass lid or anything like that that's heavy and put it on top of the cabbage to force it under the brine. You can buy weights, and if you've got the money to buy them, sure, go ahead and buy them. But I've only ever used a saucer over the top of mine to push it down under. And 9 times out of 10, you don't need to push it under, but it does help with keeping the cabbage below the brine level if you're a bit nervous about that. And remember, the first batch you make, like the sourdough, it might end up a shitstorm. You might make it and go, this is fucked, I'm never doing this again. Have at least 2 or 3 cracks at it. And then if it's not for you, it's not for you. Give up. That's fine. Move on to something else. Expend your energy somewhere where you really enjoy it. But the main thing is you've learned what works and what doesn't. So, I've got a couple of things here. Start small. Expect mistakes. Expect a few weird smells. Don't stress. Remember, use your nose. If it's tangy and sour, that's fine. If it smells offensive or bad, that's probably not fine. And let your nose be the judge of whether or not you would want to try and eat it. Obviously, if you taste it and it tastes really, really bad, then scrap it. But if you taste it and you think, no, it's just not really for me, it's a bit too tangy, a bit too sour, that's probably not bad. It's probably just that your taste buds aren't used to it. And certainly I've tried sauerkraut from the shop. Like before I started my homesteading journey, I have bought sauerkraut from the shops and I don't think it's as nice as homemade, I have to be honest. And I travelled through Germany years ago, before the kids were born, and had sauerkraut at restaurants over there. And I think over there it's made very traditionally in most areas. And certainly the sauerkraut that I had over there tastes much more like my homemade sauerkraut than the stuff that you buy in the shops. But if you're really not sure if your family likes sauerkraut, by all means go and buy a jar from the shop and try it. If they don't like it, don't bother going down that path. Instead, go with your yogurt, go with your kombucha, go with your sourdough bread, things that you know that they will eat. But don't be surprised if you start and you end up getting a bit obsessed with making fermented foods. It is really, really good for your gut. Probiotic tablets that we take, I was reading about this because I've been through this whole process in the last 6 months of antibiotics and things like that. Most probiotic tablets don't make it all the way to your intestine. And your bacteria goes all the way through your digestive tract. And MJ's just been doing health science at school, and she was talking about the digestive tract and things like that, and we were talking about it. And your digestive tract runs the entire length of your body, and you need bacteria through your entire digestive tract. As far as we could tell, you need the beneficial bacteria through that. So having tablets, while they serve a purpose, and certainly when I wasn't able to eat as well, like when I was in and out of hospital, and the hospital food is crap. Hospital food is so ultra processed. I don't know how anybody does it. I was getting the handy helper to bring me in boiled eggs so that I could eat them instead of eating what they were dishing up to me, because cornflakes and bread is not my cup of tea. But having probiotic tablets, while it serves a purpose, if you can do it through natural foods that you're making yourself at home, you're saving money, so ditching the store, but also those foods are going to work their way through your entire digestive tract, which means the chance of the probiotics getting all the way through are much higher. Yeah. Now, remember what I said at the beginning, jump on the mailing list if you're not already on it. There will be a link in the show notes. And also if you feel like giving a review, jump on and give me a review, because it definitely will push me up the rankings, which would be lovely. And I would very much appreciate it, and we'll give you a big shout out. Next week, I was going to talk some more about chickens and winter, but we've just had bird flu land here in Australia. So I'm actually going to talk about bird flu, because I don't want people to panic about having chickens and bird flu. So we're going to talk about that next week. Anyway, that is it for me for this week. I will speak to you all next week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us, or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.